Hello, boys and girls. Today we are going to be looking at how fractions and division are related and then using a number line to help us build understanding. Now, when would we use this? Well, if we end up in a situation when we have something like 2 chocolate bars but 3 people, we have to be able to divide a smaller number into a larger group. And for some of us, 2 chocolate bars divided into 3 groups looks very strange. I'm sure your third grade teacher told you the bigger number always goes first in division. Well, I'm a fifth grade teacher, and I'm here to tell you that that's not always the case. Sometimes you're going to have a smaller number divided into a larger number. 2 chocolate bars divided into 3 people. So just a quick explanation. If we have 2 chocolate bars, one way I can divide it into 3 people is divide each chocolate bar into 3 pieces. Each piece is 1/3. And now you see I end up with 6 pieces. And what's 6 divided by 3? Each person gets 2 pieces, and 1/3 plus 1/3 equals 2/3. So 2 divided by 3 is 2/3. It's really quite simple. Whenever you see a fraction, we know that this is saying I have a total of 9 and I have a part of 4. So you're taking 4 and dividing it into 9 groups. If I had 4 chocolate bars and I divided that into 9 groups, I would end up with 4/9 in each group. I like to tell my students a little story about a king and a peasant, just as a little trick to remember the order. So what we do, if this is a carrier, who's going to be on top? The king or the peasant? The king. The king gets carried. Who does the carrying? Obviously the peasant. The king goes on top, the peasant carries the king around the town. The king is certainly not going to lift up that peasant and carry him around. You'll see where I'm going. When I'm trying to remember which comes first, I think about a buffet line. If they were having a royal buffet, who would go first? Would the king say, "Oh yes, peasant, go on ahead"? Of course not. He'd say, "Get in back, you get the scraps." So the king comes first and the peasant comes last. Now since I'm describing this, I'm going to talk about when we set this up. We don't use this so much right now, but we will later. I imagine that this is a little castle. Who lives inside the castle? The king. Who's stuck outside in the rain and the hot sun? The peasant. And if we just remember the king and the peasants, it's a little trick to remembering which number is placed where. Because it does get a little bit confusing in the 5th grade, because it's not always the big number that's on top, or the big number that comes first, or the big number that goes inside. Sometimes we're going to have a smaller number that is our king. So we need to remember that. Now we're going to look, now that we've looked at how fractions and division are related, we're going to look at how to put fractions on a number line. So if I'm given this division sentence, how do I write that as a fraction? Who is my king? 1. Who is my peasant? 3. So I set up my number line. Where do fractions live on a number line? In between which 2 numbers? Fractions are less than 1. 1/3 means I have 1 out of the 3 pieces. I don't even have 1 whole. Try to picture 1/3 of a pizza, 1/3 of a cookie. Do you have the whole thing? You don't. You only have parts. So they exist in between 0 and 1 on the number line. So I labeled 0 and 1. Now how do I know how many pieces I need to break it into? Does our numerator tell us that, or our denominator? Our denominator tells us that. The denominator tells us our total number of pieces. Remember, our numerator tells us the amount that we have. So if I need to break it into 3 pieces, I'm going to draw 2 lines. That's a little bit confusing. you always draw one less line than your number so that you make sure you have 1, 2, 3 pieces. If you make a mistake, just change it. It's not that big of a deal. But always check your work. When you set up your number line, make sure that your number of pieces matches your denominator. Notice, not the number of lines. I have 1, 2, 3, 4 lines, and I have 2 lines on the inside. We're not counting the lines. We're counting the pieces. 1, 2, 3. And now I'm going to label it. If I have 3 pieces total, denominator tells me my pieces total, and this is my first one, and here's my second one out of 3, and 1 whole is the same as 3/3. I wanted to mark 1 divided by 3, so then I just put my dot on 1/3, which is the same as 1 divided by 3. We're going to go through a couple more examples just to make sure we understand. If I have 4 divided by 5, how do I write that as a fraction? What is 4 divided by 5 as a fraction? Who's my king? My king always comes first into the fade line. He's not going to let the peasant. And of course, the king gets to ride on top of the carriage, not below the carriage. So I set up my number line. When I'm doing fractions, I'm always working between 0 and 1. My denominator is my total number of pieces. So I break it into 5, draw 4 lines, and then I check my work. Do I have this right number of pieces? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If I don't have 5 pieces, I would need to adjust it, either adding 1 more piece or taking a piece away. Then I get to label it. Here's my first, second, third, and fourth piece. But my number line is between 0 and 1. Remember, these are fractions. This is 1 out of 5. This is 2 out of 5. This is 3 out of 5. This is 4 out of 5. And 1 whole is the same as 5 out of 5. That's the most difficult part. At the end, you get to do the nice easy step of identifying 4/5 is right here on 4/5. Let's do one more example. Say you're given the number 7 divided by 9. How do we write that as a fraction? King goes on top, the peasant goes on bottom. Set up your number line, 0, 1. How many pieces are we going to break our number line into? 9 pieces, because 9 is our denominator, which is our total. Then I'm going to check to make sure I have the right number of pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oops, I have 10 pieces. So I need to take one of them away, and then I check again, constantly checking my work. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I have 9 pieces, and I can label my number line. I have 1 out of 9 pieces, 2 out of 9, 3 out of 9, 4 out of 9, 5 out of 9, 6 out of 9, 7 out of 9, 8 out of 9, and remember, once you hit 9 out of 9, that is your whole, and then simply label it. And that is how Paul Valdez come to the front office, Paul. And that is how fractions and divisions are related, and how we put those numbers on a number line.